Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm going to be talking about the new albums from the future sound of London, Environment 6 and 6.5. The future sound of London, Gary Cobain and Brian Duggins. Where to even start with these guys? Basically, they are one of the most influential and creative electronic bands of all time. They started in the early 90s as a rave outfit, scoring a big hit with their single Papua New Guinea, but went on to experiment further into all sorts of different styles of ambient music and psychedelia, with a massive output that I can't even begin to do justice in a single video. I've heard most of their albums, save for their From the Archive series and some random projects from obscure aliases here and there, and it's pretty safe to say I'm a huge fan of this band. So far, I haven't heard a single album from FSOL that I didn't like. And with a career that spanned over 25 years, that's really something. If I were to ever make a list of my top 10 favorite electronic artists ever, FSOL would undoubtedly make the cut. Maybe not top 5, but top 10 definitely. Unbelievable amount of respect for these guys. Basically, every single one of their albums is like its own little musical world, with each track being some kind of interesting location or a little detour. Their stuff is always super immersive and interesting, like exploring an alien planet or something. Well, I'll go down with their discography so far, though just as FSOL. Though it's pretty dated, this is some pretty straightforward 90s techno rave. It's also pretty awesome, and one of the reasons I happen to love this era of music. One of the most gorgeous and detailed ambient albums of all time. To be honest, this isn't one of their better ones in my opinion, but still, awesomely detailed ambient album. A turn for the dark and noisy, actually somewhat underrated album if I have to say so myself. But nowhere near as underrated as this. This album got flack for being an unexpected turn into straight 60s psychedelic rock, but as someone who's grown up with that kind of music, it is absolutely brilliant, and screw the naysayers. Okay, this one is basically just Lifeform's leftovers. Bit of a disappointment, but they had the good taste to at least make this a fairly fascinating album in its own right. Interesting turn for the cold and mechanical, but still keeping the same heavily detailed ambient stylings as always. Fairly similar to the previous album, bit more live instrumentation I think. And this one's surprisingly more human sounding. And this one, why did some people stop checking these guys out again? This is seriously one of their best albums to date. Mixes some of the best qualities of the early Lifeforms days with the isness and amorphous androgynous sound. Definite must listen. And this is just scratching the surface. There's still other albums they released as amorphous androgynous, like Tales of Ephedrina and Alice in Ultraland, among others. They released one pretty awesome album as Yage, called The Woodlands of Old. There's a compilation of early tracks in their rave days called Earth Beats. The list just goes on and on. I've seen a lot of people drop away from the band after finding the isness and environments to be disappointing, wishing FSOL would release another real album. But I have to say, those people are seriously missing out, because the Environment series are their new real albums. Just as detailed as and on point as all their older stuff, and even venturing into new territory previously untouched by the old stuff. With exception of the first Environments volume, but still. They've aged quite gracefully. And here they are yet again with not just one new volume in the Environment series, but 2! I'd asked how did they turn out, but let's face it, I went in with high expectations and came out with those expectations met. I will have to admit this volume isn't exactly as boundary pushing as some of the other volumes in this series. I think they are pretty similar to earlier FSOL albums, both really old ones and more recent ones. But of course, it's just as brilliant as always. And yeah, there's 2 of them, so even better. Just a wide palette of all the new and old flavors of FSOL we've gotten over the years, and it's all here. I think overall 6 and 6.5 are more electronic than Environments 5 was, not quite as many human elements, and maybe in some areas going back to similar sounds of earlier Environments albums like 2 and 3, although a little more organic feel than those. Oh, maybe I don't have 2 and 3 super fresh in my mind. And not to mention, there's also a lot more tracks than usual. Both Environment 6 and 6.5 have 23 tracks, many of which are really short, like under 2 minutes. I'll do my best to describe what's going on in these albums, and I'll start with 6. 6 is definitely the more electronic of the two, more of a throwback to the old Lifeforms days, I think. Like, it starts out with Polarize, which is more industrial and machine-like, and admittedly not a great opener. Like, it's a good song, but I did kinda... It didn't exactly grow on me with repeat listens. But it only drifts off into more interesting areas after that. Mountain Path is more tranquil and psychedelic with lots of harp sounds. And Thought Pattern is a more electronic track with a pretty catchy and intriguing melody. Other highlights include Soul 7, which reminds me of, like, Interstate Period Monolake, maybe. Symphony for Halia has all these cascading synths, slow plodding beats, and interesting choirs for added atmosphere. We got the catchy IDM acid house influenced electric Pastrol and Ute Moik. The dark, intense, and driving Leak Stereo 70, the jazzy Meanders, and the peaceful closer Solace, which has an Asian-influenced intro before turning into a more typical Lifeform-style track. And then there's the plethora of interludes, like Motioned, which is all tribal and brooding. Forced Soundbed, which reminds me of Birdwings from Lifeforms a little. SEQ/-9, which sounds like an out-of-context acid house song intro that abruptly cuts off. Beyond the Field of Vision, which has some cool guitar sounds, and my personal favorite of the interludes, Wild Weather, which has a lot of these abstract and odd orchestral and piano samples, making an unsettling but fascinating atmosphere. There are, of course, plenty of other tracks that I didn't really mention, but I think a lot of these tracks kind of seem to work more as transitional elements more than individual tracks in their own right, which also includes kind of some of the longer ones, like, Lichen, or Lycaon. I have never seen it spelled with an A, but whatever. That track is a little more abstract, but usually just kind of passed by without me noticing. Despite its length, I think it works more as a transitional element more as anything. Just kind of helping set up that atmosphere. And FSOL are known for making the kind of album that you listen to for the full experience rather than any individual tracks. A handful of unimportant ones won't take anything away from me. I'm just used to that kind of thing from FSOL at this point. If there's anything else to add, I do have to say all the acid house-ish tracks actually after a while started to remind me kind of more of like their old Accelerator days. And I can't remember the last time they did anything in this vein. Sure, they may be more ambient than actual Accelerator, because of course they are, but I really did find it interesting that they were kind of emulating those old sounds and calling back to that period. So if you're hoping for something more like the old days of FSOL back when they gave their albums names besides environments, you will like this stuff for sure. That being said, 6 was definitely a step down from Environments 5. While I'm game for a throwback, that was what 6 felt like. More of a throwback to the 90s styles more than anything else. Environments 5 was boundary pushing and combined all sorts of sounds from both the old days and the new days, and felt like they were ending up in even new territory previously unexplored by them. But, you know, 6 is definitely awesome in its own right. And while we're on that topic, let's talk about Environment 6.5, which was even better than 6, and continued the progression that 5 took. Well, didn't really continue the progression, but was more like Environments 5. While 6 focused on more electronic elements, 6.5 had a good balance between electronic and acoustic elements, and just seemed to encompass everything that was awesome about the entire Environment series. There's even more highlights this time than on 6. We've got Solid Earth with its ethnic percussion and intense atmospherics. We got Anacro Rhythm, which was like an amorphous androgynous track, but even more epic and expansive than usual. We got Opalite, which was like the better tracks on Environment 6, like Thought Pattern, mostly made of little intriguing little synth patterns. Pretty cool. The bouncy Something Approaching Happiness, which lives up to its title and just puts a smile on my face. Dark Seed, which is like FSOL's take on an Aphex Twin Druck style drum and bass song, albeit more atmospheric, as you would expect. And then there's Hollow Earth. Quite possibly the best track on either volume, starting out simple with some shifting ambience and then some catchy guitar patterns before turning into this amazingly epic and psychedelic track. Oh, and speaking of epic and psychedelic, there's also the track right after that, I Dream in Viral Blue, which is just like an intense blast of pure awesome. Lots of electronic and psychedelic washes with punchy horns shoving them all in your face. Other highlights include the catchy synth-driven Ain't Gonna Lie, which may or may not be the track that SEQ/-9 from Environment 6 was trying to be an intro to, although a bit slower. Or the intense spy movie soundtrack vibes of The Day the Poles Shifted. There's also the chilled-out Halodule, and its more abstract and happy cousin Gradual But Not Continuous. The spooky ambience of Magnox. The weird dubstep/acid house influenced experimentation of Emissions of Light, the light jazziness of the fittingly titled Bright Skies, and the beautiful ambient closer, Strange Allure. Admittedly, I wasn't quite into the second half of 6.5 as I was the first half, but there is still just so much awesome contained within 6.5. The one thing 6 might have over 6.5 though is that the transitional track stood out a little more on 6. Maybe it's just because the standouts stood out so much more on 6.5, but I don't know. I remember more of the transitional tracks on 6 than I do on 6.5. One thing's for sure though, and it's that if you dare call yourself a fan of the future sound of London, you owe it to yourself to check out both of these albums. One may have clearly come out over the other, but I do kind of feel the need to put them in the same package given their titles. There's just so much weird ambience and detail and interesting sounds to be found on here, as you'd expect out of these guys, and I really don't have much else to say to it, besides these were freaking amazing, and you can expect them on my year-end list too. For Environment 6, I'm overall feeling a solid 8 out of 10. For 6.5, I'm feeling an 8.5 out of 10, and if you combine them into the same package, we'll go 8.7 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.